Howdy, y'all. Now dig this. This is my submission into the tag that just started going around, the joys of collecting. And I'm sorry I don't recall who actually started the tag a day or two ago, but it had its genesis in a video that Anthony made, Reaper Tate made a few days ago, about, getting back to the joys of why we collect. All right. I've collected, over my life, I've collected a few things, comic books being, the biggest obsession for, 50 years, really. I don't consider myself much of a collector these days, a comic book collector these days, but I'm still in the fray, and, I suppose I will be, really, for the rest of my life. There's always going to be comic books that I want, so I'll keep going with that. In the past, I've collected action figures, not, full bore like I have with comic books. None of these other things that I've ever collected I ever went full bore like with comics, but I've collected action figures, and particularly Megos. And I'm actually going to make a video. There's going to be an upcoming video about my Mego collecting here in the new year. I've collected record albums, posters. I've still got a massive poster collection upstairs. Beatles memorabilia. So I've had more than my share of things that I've collected over the years. Now, here's where we kind of flip the whole thing. And the greatest point that I am going to make in this video is not so much the joy of collecting, although I've had more than my share of that over the decades. Over the last 15 years or so, it's been more about the joy of not collecting. Now, hear me out, folks. Hear me out. Hear me out. I was born an old soul. Even in my childhood, when my aunts and uncles and everybody would come over with my cousins and all, and my folks and my aunts and uncles would play games, and all of us kids would get together and, run around and play together and all that. I always enjoyed kind of hanging out with the adults, I don't know why that is, but I did. I've always enjoyed the company of people older than me. I was born an old soul. Skip ahead to when I met Ellis, 26 plus years ago, and I started hanging out with him and his sisters and all their cousins and all that. I mean, people that were 40, 45, 50, 55 years older than me. Really old folks in their 80s and even into their 90s. You know, I loved that. And when Ellis and I first started hanging out, we would all pile in the car and go down here to our Saturday flea market here in Middletown. It's called Saturday's Market, but around here we call it the Big M. Every Saturday for years and years and years and years. And Ellis would go to the butcher's and buy his meat and all that kind of stuff. And I would run around buying, you know, Simpsons figures and comic books and all kinds of shit. Right. And then we would most often go out for lunch, and then he would always come with me on my Saturday morning shopping, and that was just going out, and I would buy, you know, new clothes or a pair of shoes, or we'd stop at the record store, or the comic shops, and I'd buy all this stuff. And I'll tell you something, in all the years that we did that, I never saw Ellis ever buy anything even once. And, you know, we talked about that a few times over our many years of friendship, and it was just, you know, he told me, he said, well, John, you have to understand, I don't understand this thing about collecting. You know, I was a child of the Great Depression. And we didn't have anything. We were just fortunate to have a home and food in our bellies every day. And plus, these were in the years before pop culture was born. And another factor is the use of plastic. You know, you just didn't have plastic shit in a pop culture when Ellis was young, so he never had any, and coupled with being a child of the Depression, the Great Depression, he never had any notion of collecting anything. Nor did any of his siblings, cousins, friends, peers, whomever. And I began to, the more time I spent with the older folks, the more I began to respect that way of living or approach to life or whatever it is you want to say. They didn't collect, they didn't fill up their homes, they didn't fill up their lives with all this stuff, you know. Like everything they had was useful. It wasn't just there to entertain. It wasn't just there to satisfy some need for an instant gratification or, you know. And I really began to respect and appreciate that kind of approach to life. So I began selling off my comic book collection in the early 90s when I was doing some local Harrisburg, Pennsylvania conventions and stuff like that, like one-day shows and all that. So when eBay came around and I started getting rid of just tons of comic books and tons of everything else, there was this magnificent feeling of relief and release. I no longer... Now, it took a while to whittle everything down, and it took years to whittle everything down and all, but I finally came up after 10 years of selling stuff on eBay, and I kind of went, whew, boy. Whew. I got out from under all that. And quickly, one of the driving factors of my desire to get rid of all this stuff that I had accumulated was I realized that I didn't want to burden my loved ones with all this stuff after I was gone. And hey, folks, you know, we know not the day nor the hour. Do you know what I mean? We know not the day nor the hour. So, every time I get rid of something, sell it, give it away, throw it in the trash, whatever it is, that's just less that my loved ones are going to have to deal with after I'm gone. And I'll tell you something. Hey, folks, everyone, I don't care what your age is. If you're 22 or 62, please have a plan in place. Please have some notes for your loved ones about what to do with all your stuff, because, you know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get like real serious and deep and everything here, but you know, you really need to consider how your loved ones are going to feel as creatures that are not involved and don't know anything about comic books or action figures or this or that. You know, please consider how they're going to feel when they wander into your man cave and go, oh shit, what are we going to do with all this stuff? Think about that. At least pull out some notebook paper and give them direction about what to do with this stuff. Anyway, okay. The other thing was getting rid of some of my most treasured possessions. I took it on as a test of the strength of my character. And that was, if I can get rid of that, beloved artifact, God Almighty, I can get rid of anything. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm sure you all do. Yes? I tested myself. And I got rid of many of the most treasured possessions that I had. And if I came through that intact and feeling all right, well then shit, man, I can get rid of anything, man, except my dog in my house, right? Do you know what I mean? So there you go. Now, do I have some regrets? Yeah. But relative to the literal thousands of artifacts I've gotten rid of, I might have a dozen or two regrets. And the other thing is, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised when you're selling your beloved things, just a couple of days after you send it out. In my case, anyway, it was like, now what was I fretting about? It's like you don't even remember. 5 days or 7 days after you mail the stuff out, you don't even remember what the hell you were so concerned about in the first place. All right, I've rambled on long enough. So, yes, do I enjoy and appreciate the joys of collecting? Oh, hell yeah. Have I also learned the joys of not collecting? Oh, hell yeah. So, hey, I don't know, I guess that's all. I guess I've made my points. So, hey, thanks for sticking through all that. See you all later. Bye-bye.